Agenda, as you see it, there's two items on there for information. If there are no questions, I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Jennifer, second by Gary. Please vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. All right, we're ready for letter C. Paul?
Okay, thank you. We'll start in on a financial review of from the disaster date, May of 11 to current, covering our recovery and rebuilding efforts.
But before you start, Paul, I just want to kind of let the board know that this is something that we started having a conversation about back in July, feeling that we need to establish what I would call basis as far as financial understanding. And so that's really what this is, okay? And so really, what we'd like to have present this to you. Any questions for clarification as we go through? You all right with that, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
Just make the questions of clarification, and leave it at that, and at the end, we can have a conversation.
Very, very good. Thank you. We're going to cover the rebuilding the permanent facilities, meaning we also rebuilt temporary facilities on the way to permanent in the first 6 or 8 months, but we're going to focus on the permanent rebuild, the tornado relief donations. They were collected by the Foundation and Joplin Schools both. Now, there were some collected by Joplin Schools that may have gone to the various individual damaged schools or destroyed schools, those administrations, as they may get any time under normal times some donations, but they were directed to deposit those and use the standard accounting procedures we have for those. But we didn't try to go in and capture all the small dollars that they may have gotten. These are the ones that came in our accounts that we solicited and worked with the Foundation closely on. Reserve operating fund balances are also a part of this review. We took the temperature of our community as we built this report and came up with the questions they were asking to make sure those got answered this evening. How much FEMA funding has not yet been received? How were the donations spent? Is the district financially stable? And those questions will be answered throughout the PowerPoint. The rebuild facilities, you see the losses there listed on the left, which we're all familiar with. We call Old South a transitional facility. It was actually, it didn't have a regular school in it, but we had kids in and out of there as need be when we did different building projects. The rebuild projects listed on the right side, 14 safe rooms, the last one, Columbia being completed currently. That's a shot there that has been out for some time, just to show the number of moves. That this does capture temporary and permanent. Basically, for the I think we had 3,000 people in the storm path, 3,000 students that lived in the storm path, and about I believe 4,000 or so were displaced from their original schools. So we built those temporary schools, the first order of business, in the first 3 or 4 months, and got through that, and then set about planning and gearing up for our permanent rebuild. But that's a good graphic there of all the activity that took place. The footnotes that are too small to read there say it does not capture the administration move back to Memorial, where we're at today. And of course, we still have one important job to do with early childhood, and we have 3 to 5-year-olds and 15 mobile units that we need to find a permanent home for. So we're working hard on that. That's the timeline going back to the disaster date. Got into our temporary schools August of 11. I believe the board in January of 12 adopted a bond issue in terms of submitting it to the voters in January, and you see the April vote date there. A month later, broke ground for the new buildings, and you can just move through there. January 14, new schools opened. I think 2 of those, East Campus, Soaring Heights, and East Middle and Irving. May of 14, started having safe room openings, Cecil Floyd, Stapleton, McKinley. June 14, more safe room openings. September, classes began at the high school at Franklin Technology Center. Safe room openings, January 15, April 15, high school Performing Arts Center opened, and safe room opening at Dunaweg and Joplin High School. May of 15, opening safe room at West Central. But if you back up to that September 14 date, as far as classes beginning, without the Performing Arts Center, and you go back to the groundbreaking in May of 12, you'll see that's a 28-month period from when ground was broken for new buildings to having all of our kids in new buildings 28 months later. And we have the last bullet point there is the winter 16, the project proceeds at Columbia for its safe room. So we hopeful that'll be completed this winter. The rebuild revenue, that all of that's been collected with the exception of the footnote there below FEMA and SEMA and city, $222 million. Insurance proceeds listed there, bond proceeds. The public was asked about to vote on the $62 million bond. You see that $68.1 million. That reflects the $6.1 million additional that bond buyers paid for a premium on the bonds, so that entire issue brought in over $68 million. The FEMA, SEMA, and the city funding we expect to receive $53.3 million, of which that's footnoted that $18.3 million is pending approval for us at this point. Donations, $2.9 million. CDBG grant, $2.8 million. And we applied that grant largely to our local match in for the safe rooms that we built, the 14 safe rooms. So they allowed us to apply all of that toward that. And then we did use out of reserve operating fund balances $8 million, coming up to the total of $222 million.
Clarifying question. On the $53 million, the footnote is $18 million is pending approval. Mean we've applied for it, but it has not been approved?
No, it's we've applied for a lot of it and been paid. Well, excuse me. The pending approval amount would be, we have a east closeout project submitted May 5th. In the next 2 weeks, week or 2 weeks, we're going to submit the high school Franklin technology project. So no, they've not all been submitted for approval. Some have been, and some are yet to be submitted.
So does that mean that the difference between 53 and 18 has been approved and received?
Yeah, everything above the 18 has been received from those various sources.
Thank you.
And Paul, are we guaranteed to get that 18, or is that part of that, or are errors and omissions part of that?
Our errors and omissions are part of that, and we're going to submit a lot more cost than what we what they have what we've been advised as what's collectible, but the errors and omissions, 8.3 or 4 million, is a part of that number.
Can I ask a question? When they were talking about the bond issue, that if we passed it right then, it was supposed to have matching funds. If we passed much, is that included in here? Did we get that? I just remember that being part of the
Matching,
presentation, that if we passed the bond, that we would get matching. That's why it was so important to do it right then.
Well, I think the reference then was in the campaign was that we were going to use part of those proceeds of $62 to $68 million for our local match that we knew we would have. For instance, on the safe rooms, our local match is 25% as we built all those safe rooms. For all the rebuild projects, the minimum local match we'd have to fund to receive FEMA and SEMA funding is 15%. So we were discussing at the bond issue campaign that some of those funds from the bond will be used for our local match for these projects.
Okay, so it didn't give us more money. It
was figured as, well, it gave us
the way Cedar explained it was that it would.
It gave us $68 million monies to work with it, which part of that served as local match. Part of it, we just built brick and mortar with it.
But the match,
Okay.
what you're getting at there is 50% match brought on the 85% from the federal government.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. Did we get more? So our 62 million was supposed to turn into like
Well,
135
that's what-
million
right.
or something. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, for our $62 million local investment, which produced 68 by the buyers, it produced a project of $222 million.
Okay. Okay.
Question about the donations, it says 2.9 million. Were those only the donations that were earmarked for rebuild?
Right.
Okay, so there's other donations that
Right.
are not a part of this that,
Not a part of this picks.
You'll
We'll
be able
come
to
to
count those?
donations is another slide we're coming to.
Okay.
But this is the part that went toward brick and mortar.
Paul, have we closed out Irving?
No. We're going to close
Have
out.
we submitted Irving?
No,
for
we're going to submit,
closeout?
We're going to submit high school and Franklin Tech. It's the biggest project in the next week or two, followed by Irving.
And you said you submitted it May 5th. Is that normal to not have heard anything for 5 months?
I wouldn't say what's normal in this regard, first time through it, and I don't want to speak for FEMA. Rebuild costs, list there by site. The reason we say projected on high school, Franklin Tech, we have some retainage there, but we basically feel it's a good number for this point in time, and we do have some retainage and some building costs yet to spend for the final safe room over Columbia. So that's why those are footnoted projections, but the other two schools are in and over. That's just pictures of what we built, which everybody's pretty familiar with.
Can I take a pause right there?
Yeah.
SAP Design Associates, they're the ones that designed the Joplin Irving Elementary. They won a design award for the school that they made for us when we were at the MSBA conference. We happened to Deb ran into them, and they said, "Don't leave. We've got something for you to take." So there's something nice to share. It says there was a jury of 7 different architects, and this was the 2014 Design Awards from the AIA Springfield chapter of the American Institute of Architects. So give that to somebody besides me. Here you go.
Their design.
Maybe that can hang at Irving.
Their design is Irving, top right there is a design that won that award. So the safe rooms there, 14, I believe, and you see the lower right, Columbia in process, but it's not it doesn't jump out, but beneath the 14 community reference top left, you see total capacity 16,301 residents can be housed in those 14 units.
Boy, that's been a major addition to the
That's-
size of stuff.
That covers a lot of.
Really nice.
A
And of
lot
cour-
dual purpose.
And of course, yeah, they're not there just for tornado. As we know, we built them for gymnasiums, instructional use. I believe some have Wi-Fi in there for student use, classroom sort of thing. So that's the beauty of it. It can provide shelter in times of storms, but everyday use throughout the school year.
I was there last week at Kelsey Norman. They had a camp out inside. They had
Okay.
tents inside, and they're doing a literacy night.
No
Camping.
fire, no fire.
No, reading with their flashlights.
Camp in.
Guys about the fire.
No fire, but they had s'mores.
That's not real discernible, but you see the numbers on the map and the circles. That just shows that they're pretty well spread out across town, community. Donations started coming in the evening of the tornado. Of course, that was in monies, as well as, if you look at the top right picture, there is the North Middle School gymnasium. Started to fill up in those early days with goods that were donated coming in from all over, so dollars and goods. Volunteers showed up. I mean, people showed up to volunteer, and then we tried to organize and bring in some others to help support the donations effort, anywhere from manning the phones to what would you like to contribute to where to send it, and working closely with the foundation on getting those monies deposited and recorded. Specific funds were set up to direct donations eventually to Operation Rising Eagle, which I believe that was more in the fall time frame, because we got past a temporary school building effort, and we were setting our sights on what to do now that we're in temporary schools, what's coming next. So we solicited, we offered to the public, if you'd like to contribute to our rebuild activity that will be following, that would be a place to contribute. Adopt a Classroom likewise, and Adopt an Eagle to help students out with the Eagle adoption, and help teachers resupply their classrooms where those donations were earmarked. And 80% of the donated funds went to the Joplin Schools Foundation. That didn't print too well there, but
Paul, can I ask why the 80% went to the foundation as opposed to just keeping it within our budget? There must have been a reason. so-
Right. There was typical donors. Typically, both small and large will seek out a foundation. Our foundation was already formed, had been serving since, I believe, 1993 or something, not in this capacity, but it was set up to accept donations and be the custodian of funds like this, and to work hand in glove with the district, that when we had a need for those donations, we present the need to the foundation and receive monies in that way. So
A lot of donors will only give to a 501c3.
Okay.
Even though
And the school
it-
district's not one of those?
No.
But we are tax exempt. They can give both, and they do give both, but a lot just, there's so much giving to organizations. They're like Ron said, they're 501c3s, and when people hear foundation, they know they file a separate tax return. They maybe know people on the board, or they know that's what they're set up for, and they want to give that direction. So they gave to both. The foundation received the lion's share of the funds, and then to Joplin Schools also.
And then the foundation turned around
We-
and gave it to the school?
Right, we submitted requests for reimbursement. We would front the money to buy things or pay for things, and submit them an invoice or a request for funding.
For all those three funds? For Rising Eagle, Adopt a Classroom, Adopt an Eagle? Who managed those?
Those were, I know Operation Rising Eagle, I believe. Kelly, didn't we manage the Adopt a Classroom?
Managed for the most part here.
The two, Adopt Eagle and Adopt a
That's
Classroom?
the 20% that we manage.
Were
You could-
those under those three?
You can join us if you like. Yeah, so that was kind of a split arrangement there.
I was on the foundation board during this time. We tracked all designated funds if it was given for a purpose, whether it be a science lab or to build a building or landscaping or books or libraries, whatever the purpose. If it was designated by the donor, we tracked it by designation. And then the district submitted requests for reimbursement after they spent the money for that purpose, and then the foundation reimbursed it for that designated purpose.
Were all of the funds expended for those? So like if somebody donated
I think there's a-
100,000
We're
and.
coming up on a slide that's going to show
I
balance.
think there's a number here, but it's a very small remaining amount.
Right.
Okay.
And I did want to, while we're on this point of the foundation, the service they gave us, we met in the first weeks and organized this with them, and we really appreciate their effort. They stepped in the breach at a huge time of need. Of course, they're a volunteer organization. There's nobody that I'm aware of nobody on the payroll at that time, was there, Ron, or since, or before? So all volunteers, and then special thanks to Lynn Hempen, who she more or less acted as bookkeeper, is that right?
Yep.
And, many hundreds of hours of tracking these donations, so thanks to the foundation and all members.
And is it not true that when people designate or donate to a foundation, it provides one more layer of documentation and transparency?
Yes.
In that, had that all remained within the R8 system, you all would have been spending that money and making the decision in-house. By putting it in the foundation, you had to request it, which creates another paper trail.
Right.
Then it comes back, which creates a second paper trail.
Right. You had our administration seeing what we consider to be a valid claim. First our administration and board spent funds on something, went through our approvals and our purchasing policies. Then, to get reimbursed, it went through another board. So yes, you had two sets of eyes on any one transaction.
Plus, it also provided the school audit the ability to look at that entire paper trail. So that it ended up being a very positive thing for the school's state audit.
So you're saying when we had our audit, they could audit the separate 503Cs?
They interviewed the foundation, and they had a copy of all of our records to review.
Yeah, that happened to us too with the state audit.
Yeah.
When you have in the charter of the foundation, it states, it's a big thing to get a 501c3 designation, the IRS to give those out. And so they look at the purpose of your organization. Foundation's sole purpose is to serve with and for Joplin schools. It has no other purpose, right, Ron?
Correct.
So that's some of the appeal that when there's enough money in the foundation, the auditors have a dollar amount in mind. Some years, if there's a slow year, or maybe they just started, or they're trying to get their legs underneath them, they don't have much money coming in, they may not be audited, they're insignificant to our budget. Other years, like these years, they cross that critical mass number, and the auditors pull them in as a related party or a related activity or related function to the district. They're not us, we're not them, but they exist only because of us, so they get viewed as part of us. Is that accurate?
I was just told by the auditor's office that they were not allowed to audit anything that was not, that was a separate. So that was why I was
The
surprised by
foundation had
that.
its own independent audit in conjunction with the school's
Right.
regular annual audit. On top of that, the school had a set of all of our records related to donations
Yeah.
for them to view.
Okay.
They
I
did
only
not-
know what I was told.
The state auditors did not independently audit the foundation only,
Okay.
but they had the records to review in the schools.
And it's all
audit.
part of the fact that the relationship was there, that's why they had.
Right.
the audits.
Okay.
So moving on then to donations received, 6.8 million. This is tornado relief donations. We've had, like I said earlier, we had other donations received. And we always have donations coming in the district for various activities. This is solely those relate to tornado relief. And we see the expenditures there, the 2.9 rebuilding that Jeff referred to earlier. But then other purposes were used for tornado relief to resupply instructional needs and equipment, the human support factor for students, student parents, and staff that got hit by the tornado, and salary and benefits toward managing donations was a small part of that $109,000. The other, there's three components inside that $109,000. One is the St. Louis Cardinals made a donation of $40,000 designated for labor only, specifically labor to help distribute clothing and clothing items out to students that, again, were without because of the storm. We had a distribution center, you might recall from the audit last spring, state audit, that since then we've downsized that severely, but we had a small distribution center that we manned, and the St. Louis Cardinals grant was paying, designated for that labor to man that distribution center, get those clothing items out to needy students. The second leg of that $109,000 salary and benefits was the foundation directed $43,200 for us to establish a grant administration position. So knowing that we had needs with all this going on to reach out for grants, manage grants, ensure compliance with grants, file reports for grants, that was the foundation saw it as a need that they needed to help us meet. We've since merged that into our normal operating budget, but that was a big help to us to get that position funded.
What was the application award process for the student, parent, staff support?
The process there was, let's see, I'm pretty familiar with the Adopt a Classroom and Adopt an Eagle, but Kelly, would you like to comment on?
So those need requests came from our buildings or from our staff if they were affected by the tornado. So the process is the request would come in, it'd be reviewed, and then it would be
Reviewed by?
It'd be reviewed depending on what funds it was coming out of. So for example, Adopt a Classroom, Adopt an Eagle, those types of requests would have been reviewed by Bright Futures because they manage those. Operation Rising Eagle was more rebuilding, so that wouldn't have been parent need. But essentially, the superintendent and the director of community development.
And how were the students, parents, and staff made aware of the availability of these funds?
I would just say everyone knew we were receiving donations, so we did spend a lot of time.
I know that,
outreach.
but I mean, it's one thing to know you're receiving donations, it's quite another to know how to
did
go make a
outreach
request.
We did outreach in the
I
building.
think a lot came through the principals of the destroyed buildings. They knew their students' needs and their families, if they got hit or not, and if they were without.
So was it an individual information program developed by each principal independently? There wasn't a systematic?
No, I think it was systematic, but I think a lot of the needs were identified and originated by those close to the students and the student families. And of course, we as employer, we knew our employees' needs.
We also spent, a lot of those funds were designated as well. So for example, they would want to support an individual classroom. So we would work out of the community development department, we would work directly with those teachers to help them spend down their funds. So they would know how much had been designated for their individual classroom, and then they would submit requests back to us for how they would want to spend those funds. So it varied, but we did a ton of outreach to the buildings letting them know that the funds were available to spend down. And the same thing with staff who were affected. We made multiple calls out because our staff was very hesitant to ask for help. So.
But, I mean, the specific answer is there was not a formal application award process. It was an informal process developed on an ad hoc basis.
I would say it was a standard process applied, but not a form, I guess. So not a systematic in that sense. All the requests came through either the Director of Community Development or the superintendent or both. They also would come through the counselors and the principals.
No, I understand. I understand that
Okay.
part. I
Yep.
was just trying to get a handle on how formalized
Right.
the application award process was. That's all.
The third part of that, besides the St. Louis Cardinals grant for that distribution center labor and the grant administration establishment of that left 26 out of the $109,000 salary and benefits. That left $26,301 is the remainder of that went toward. In the first 9 or 10 months, we hired some clerical support help for donations tracking and all the administration that went with donations during that first 9 or 10 months peak of activity. So that's what was really spent out of that $109,000, a little over $26,000 to supplement what principals, teachers, administration were doing, on ourselves to keep up with that activity, to hire some additional help. So that does work down to a balance as of last June 30 of $227,000. And I know we've been making outreaches to the schools since then, and since school opened up, and I don't know that number today. It's quite a bit less than 227, but it's somewhere around perhaps 150,000, give or take, is a rough estimate today as we speak, and we expect that to wind down to wrap up, hit zero in the coming months. So we're anxious to get those donations working in the direction they were originally intended. So
Paul, where's that money? That you just said there's 150,000 left? Did
I said there's an
understand that?
estimate of something less than 227 or possibly 150. Yes.
Left that was donated.
Yeah.
And so what is the plan for those funds? and
We're
how
still
do
going through the
people
list of
access
designated.
that?
Today, I believe Kelly's helping out, asking the schools, here's money's available for this, that, and the other, and the principals are responding. Designated funds.
Yes,
In the same way, most of
almost all
those.
of these are designated. So for example, we had thousands of donations come in, individual line items. So we have a list and it's designated funds. So for example, $100 for the ag department, $300 for FBLA, $1,000 for the choir, $250 for cross country. That's the level of detail. So what we've done is we've reached out to all those individual department directors, letting them know how much their remaining funds are, and then we've given them a deadline to spend those funds down.
So when we make that last pass and we come to some point in the coming weeks that everybody's been heard, they've had an opportunity, and we're trying to encourage, let's get this so kids can benefit from this. At some point, we'll be bringing, if there's any residual or people say we don't have a need, our needs are taken care of, we may be bringing back a relatively small balance to the board, asking for a direction. What does this board, because I believe the foundation has expressed an interest to ask us to try to wrap up their part of this with this last fall submittal to them of request for reimbursement to us for these expenses we're paying out today. We're going to make another request for reimbursement from the foundation, and then ask them to fund, pay over the residual so they can step back, and this board administration can manage the rest of it, whatever's left.
Have you done any analysis on the data to see, is it the Irving district was 20%? Like you broke it out into which one? Was there a clear need that one group of people?
We've not done any analysis by location that I'm aware of.
No, I would say, I can tell you which groups were popular as far as funds. Our band received quite a bit of support. Some of our performing arts groups received quite a bit of support. The Adopt an Eagle and Adopt a Classroom were very successful programs. But we haven't done a breakdown by individual building.
interesting to see
It was
where the
very-
need is, because if the need is gone, then those groups maybe don't have a need the next time something comes up, maybe they're taken care of, and we
Reallocate.
share with everyone else.
Absolutely. Now, our number one priority is to honor the will of the donor.
Sure.
So we do put that first. But should we get to the end and we have unspent dollars, we can certainly go back to the donors and ask them for permission to change the designation if we need to.
Yeah, I think we need to have a conversation with the board, though, as we move forward,
Right.
very transparent, so.
So that's the expenditures listing, and we talked about most of these things, but that's just a representative sample of the types of things that were purchased with these dollars. The one-to-one initiative there under instructional is the UAE contributed, I believe, 1.1 million toward laptops when we made the switch from textbook at the high school to laptops. Winter camp was December of 11, that first winter, and the principals and administration, the board saw a need for rather than the kids to be out of school for 2 weeks, which most celebrate. A lot of those kids were in temporary homes or 2 or 3 families under one roof, and saw a need to keep the kids busy and productive, kind of like in summer school, but just on a short-term winter camp, we called it, to get to the school opening again second semester. So that's what that was about. The third part of the presentation this evening is the discussion of operating reserve fund balances. Operating fund being the fund that pays teacher salaries, all salaries, lights, utilities, everything it takes to run a district. That's the towers you see reflected there. There is a linear reference down below, total of all funds, which is just what it says. It's got the fund balances of the debt service fund as well as the capital funds in those numbers, so they're not reflected in the towers. That's just a memorandum total there. But you see back in the June before the tornado of 10, we had a 21% balance, and I think I read, maybe it was in the report Dr. Ritter provided, but I believe Melville had a summary sheet in their report, Dr. Ritter, that commented on fund balances throughout the state. And just to give you some context, I believe the median was in a range of 25 to 27 or 8%. Does that sound? Anyway, so we've been as high as 30 before, slightly over, but we usually are in the range of 22 to 26, somewhere in there. But anyway, we were back the year prior, 21%. Month after the tornado, we had received a $5 million check from Travelers Insurance, and the beginnings of our donations had come in. Of course, no spending of those funds had happened yet, because it was just 5 weeks later. So we had a kind of a pop up there to 27%. Then you see the stepping down, because we had to act as the bank, if you will. You keep hearing about these grants and reimbursements. We were spending funds, monies from our own funds, and been turning in requests for reimbursement as a large part of our revenue. So that shows us spending funds for temporary school district for several thousand students, and then getting reimbursed, as well as supplies, and then funding the permanent rebuild and getting reimbursed for the majority of that. So that shows that step down that we expected back in the fall of 11, and we'd be stepping down our balances. This last year, June 30, 15, primarily due to, on the operations, normal operations side, we always have programs and grants that pay us again after we've expended funds. That say we had expenditures in the 14 year, we got paid in the 15 year, that reflects that. No expenditures, reimbursements in 15 for 14, both on operations and on tornado recovery operations. For instance, our leases that we were paying heavy leases for those 3 years, 12, 13, and 14 temporary leases, those ended, and money started coming in as late as 15 to reimburse us for 85% of these, the mall leases and the East Middle School lease and the Franklin Tech leases. There were quite a few dollars. So the other part of that June 30, that's pop up there, the small part of that is we purposely budget conservatively every year, so that even with an even budget like we went into this year with a level budget, we fully expect to be under under budgeting revenues to some reasonable degree because you don't want to cut that too close. And we budget a little bit more in expenditures than we plan to. That's just conservative budgeting. And what that does, if you, you're always then receiving a little bit more in revenues and spending a little bit less than you planned on. And when you do that, you do have surplus as a result because of that conservative nature of budgeting. You want that as a result of your budgeting. So that, coupled with the timing of collections this year into June 30 for prior year expenditures, were two big pieces that caused that pop-up. A third piece you're probably more familiar with is when we had the levy adopted back in August of 14, we were positioning for possible cuts in state funding or withholdings, and we directed that 30 cents of the debt service levy be placed over in the general operating levy, and we reduced the debt service levy, so we held the taxpayer at the same level total, but we took this 30 cents and placed it over here in the general in case our general state revenues took a hit. Fortunately, that did not happen. We received the state funding. There were no withholdings, but the board, in the time frame of June and July, had directed that for reasons of we're having some financial issues with our health fund. It's been underfunded, and we're trying to get our legs under us on the health fund budget, as well as possibly wanting to get through all this rebuilding and collections of all the monies we expect to collect. The board directed to keep that $2.6 million that would have been in Fund 3, Debt Service Fund, keep it over in the general fund, primarily for those two purposes as contingencies in the operating fund. So that's probably 4 or 5 percentage points of that 22.6 pop-up is just from that one transaction that the board said, leave it in operating funds, which we did.
So do you have a target percentage operating fund balance?
Well, the current target is under the Standards of Excellence model that the prior board had set was 25% to get back to 25%. But, this board and future boards, that's a board administrative decision.
That's a good number. And do you have individual targets for the individual fund balances to get you to that 25% overall figure?
Well, the 25% is just this operating fund balance. The teacher fund has zero balance because there's no levy there. We pay all the teachers. We transfer monies over to the teacher fund just to pay the teacher expenses. The debt service fund is even with that $2.6 million shift over, it's sufficient on its own merit with the 91 cents. In August of 15, this board said put that back to 91 cents, so it should pay debt principal and interest sufficient out into the future. And then on the capital projects fund, is there a target for that? Basically, when we get through all this recovery and get all of our bills paid and get this and behind us, I've always maintained for a district our size, before we had all this rebuilding, that we need at least $2 million sitting in there as a minimum for a roof collapse or a bank of air conditioners going out at 2 or 3 schools. But no, the board has not set, and the committee or the board setting some direction on how much to keep in Fund 4 operating.
And if you had a target, say 25%, which would be reasonable, and you were in a non-disaster recovery period where you're in some degree of normalcy, if you projected that you were going to be significantly above the 25% because of unanticipated revenue streams, then would you notify the superintendent that really there needs to be a little more outflow to move forward?
Right. If we saw that a big influx coming, we would notify the superintendent and the board at that time.
Yeah.
And the staff, right. Yeah, everybody.
Thanks.
And certainly that's considered at the time of budgeting. That's the time we'd be looking at. What we really want there to budget is the 3 big revenue streams that, of course, we're 65% labor. That's the tail wagging the dog is our labor, which is understandable. We're in the people business. To pay labor, you want the best revenue streams that we have coming into the district. The 3 best revenue streams are sales tax, local property tax, and the state funding formula. even though they do vary some year to year. I mean, look at the 2008 recession, sales tax got, whacked, but they're still the three best, most reliable revenue streams we have. So those are the ones that when we have recurring expenditures like labor, add a teacher, add a principal, we want them to be paid by our most reliable sources. And these other revenues that come in kind of come and go, like take fines and forfeitures, which is one area that comes from is just the I-44 may have a weigh station, like out of Petro. And if they open up another one in our school district, we might have a doubler in that year or something. But then they may close one down after 4 years because they don't need two so close together. So we've got to be careful of taking an extra few $100,000 coming from a brand-new weigh station on fines and committing it to a 25-year teacher, because if that thing closes outside our, so the three big revenue streams are the ones we really want to guide our recurring expenditures to. That's kind of a long-winded answer.
No, I mean, first instinctively, if I were designing, the model, I probably would shoot for 25% reserve target. I mean,
That's served us pretty well historically, and even, I'd have to say, even though no one liked getting down to 10%, we were glad that was a floor year last year that, it's 25% served us well, even with this huge disaster.
So Paul, what's the impact on salaries then? Because we know we've gotten behind in the salary area, and I think we all agree that's a focus for us. So what's the impact of this on salaries?
Balances on salary, the one rule about, or economic truth of balances is if you want X level of balances, then it has no bearing on operating budget. It's just going to sit there. That's number one. I mean, that's a board choice. If the board wants,
savings account.
It's a savings account, a rainy day fund, or let's say the best use of balances I've seen in my career is, and this is what school districts typically do, is whereas I said balances should not be viewed for recurring expenditures, they can be used for one-time or once-in-a-while expenditures, like 5-year-old computers. Maybe it's time to get in, maybe finance half a computer purchase, and maybe the other $1 million take balances down from 22% to 19% if the board wants to. So they're good for kind of one-time, sporadic, infrequent. And you need those things in your classroom. You need things that last 5, 10, 7, 10 years. So that's really the best use of a balance. Dr. Ritter, would you add to that, or?
Yeah, I would say that, the 25% is a little higher than what I'm used to. And number one, 65% of the budget salaries, typically though, it's 85%.
Right, that's low.
So, and we had this conversation once before.
Right.
What's our current number?
It's closer to 65.
But is it
60.
over all or over those top three consistent revenue sources that you use for, is it over the entire budget, 65%?
You're right, it's over the entire budget, right,
Okay,
but we
so
try to-
not just the top three revenue sources.
Yeah, a lot of your 65 though in Joplin is because of the facility issues that are going on responding to the tornado. So I think that's going to adjust back to 85 eventually. But I am watching that a little bit because that is quite a.
Well, and like Dr. Fort mentioned, we're on the low side of the, we're not where we want to be on salaries. So, it probably should be at 70 and above, but we're in that 65, 70
I know
range.
this is dangerous for me to say this, but assessed value per student, we're one of the lowest. I mean, we are the highest as far as tax levy and stuff like
Right.
that. So that we have a lot of businesses that get a pretty good deal, especially with tips.
Yep, exactly.
I don't want to be too political with that.
Right.
All right.
Now, Paul, the
Yes.
33 million, or the 22%, we've got 18 million that we haven't received, but we've already spent it. That's counted in that 22%?
No, that's what we have in the bank.
Okay. So if we get reimbursed that 18 million,
Yeah.
any portion of it that we get reimbursed causes that number to go up?
No, we have from the financing, we owe a debt of $19 million to Bank of America because we access those financings to help us get through the rebuilding project, waiting for these receipts to come in. revenues to come in.
So when that 18 million comes in, it's already spent?
Yes.
Okay.
But if we don't get that other 8 million,
We will have to.
we'll
get
have to
the-
find 8 million out
Well,
of
these
here.
balances will help serve that, backstop some of that. And if we had to, if we absolutely had to, we'd go internal first, looking at balances. If we had to get 3 or 4 or 5 million or 8. And then as a fallback, if we needed to, we could do that longer-term lease purchase, but that's a fallback if we had to go outside. But first place we'd go would be what we have, which is another reason that the board directed to keep that 2.6 million from debt service, that one-time opportunity, over into this fund for future use if we needed it, either for health insurance fund or to backstop collections that don't come in 100%.
There's one other planning issue, and that is on capital expenditures, maintenance and repair and that sort of thing. With all these new buildings, obviously, you're going to have a trough in that
Right.
demand area of the budget. However, if you adjust your reserve process as if that was an ongoing picture of maintenance and repair, then you would create a financial problem about 8 to 10 years out of some size. And so you have to have, that's why the 25% isn't such a bad number. Because
All
because
those
you've
are gonna
got
come due, all
anticipate-
those roofs are gonna be due at the same time.
That's right. And,
that's unique.
so.
When's the bond issue on the air conditioning paid off?
Well, that was a 1999 issue, so 20 years.
It was 20 years, 19.
So there's that's the third topic we wanted to cover this evening.
Can I ask
Oh, yes, sir.
Back up, so that we're all have the same understanding, the reserve, you're calling our reserve balance 22.16%.
Of the annual operating
Of
budget.
the annual operating budget.
Right.
And how many dollars is that 22%?
I think our annual operating budget with tornado taken out, which has been some time ago, but I believe would be in the $65 to $70 million range. So if you consider 25% of an annual budget of $65 million, that's the dollars we're talking about, 22% of that.
So that's $13 million.
Right.
And how much was it when we were 21%?
It was about close to the same, because the percentage is about the same. It's roughly, yeah. I would rather have the operating balances up there rather than the total of all funds. It would have had your answer listed there. But
So said another way, the operating reserves from 6/30 of 14 to 15 increased to $6 or $7 million?
yes.
That's what.
And 22%, I mean, when that gets to 25%, which I'm confident it will, I mean, that's to say that you have at June 30, in the year we get there, we have enough funding for 1/4 of the operating budget. 3 months, money's in the bank to operate your district. That's,
So how much are our monthly bills, Paul, on average?
well, it'd be 65 divided by 12, 5 or 6 million.
So we want to have 3 months of that, so 15 to 18
20,
in
20,
noted for
yeah,
3
20,
months.
25% would be 1/4 of a year, so it's just 3 months. That's the time element that's related to when we get there, 22%, a little bit less than 3 months. Okay? The lessons learned, Leadership Council helped build this slide, and why would we have this slide? Why would we do this exercise? For the benefit of ongoing normal operations to reach goals efficiently and effectively, for future crises administration, and to ensure best practices stay best. Lesson 1, consistently apply a systems approach to decision-making and implementation. Approach it broadly. And what the council, I think, was getting at there was to say, even though you're focused like a laser on any one problem, try to stay broad in your vision and look, horizontally, vertically, the organization diagonally, to see that as you fix your one problem you're dealing with, which we kind of tend to sometimes with blinders on, because we're so ready to get it corrected, but that we don't want to be impacting other parts of the organization negatively or have unintended consequences, which can often happen if you're not looking broadly. Second lesson, fully utilize PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act, which is a a principal. We're getting out into the leadership of the district, meaning as we plan and do, we don't just stop there. At some point, we have to look back at what we planned and did last year, last school opening, last building we built or something or other, whatever that is. And then the act in that phrase is, I refer to it as adjust or retool or rethink or tweak. I mean, very, very few times you're going to take on an initiative, anything new or big or unique, and hit a home run, or you're never going to hit perfection. There's always room for improvement, but you won't know that unless you look back at it and study it. Improve self-evaluation, reflection, parenthesis, realize up front limitations you're dealing with, and invite help if you see your limitations, don't know how, or if you can meet them or deal with them, you need to look outside to try to close, make those limitations, mitigate the effects of those limitations. Review best efforts following implementation to improve current and future operations, which is kind of what we said up front. They're applicable for all new, changed, and repeating initiatives. Dr. Ritter, do you want to expound on that at all? Or?
No, I think you nailed it. In other words, anytime you get approach to anything, we need to make sure that we are looking at what has happened in the past or what other people are doing.
Right, exactly.
And then eventually you make a smart decision rather than just taking random stuff and throwing it at
Right.
the problem, which I think the district has done a very good job of throwing things at the problem. So anyway, so we're learning from that. That's what we're learning from this process. So.
Very important lessons. And then a couple more. Maintain balance of efforts, emphasis, and continuity across the board. Too much of an effort or emphasis or in one area causes or can cause an imbalance and inconsistent results across the board. So while we deal with putting out a fire over here, we can't, we don't want to be leaving other operations don't want to take our eye off the ball to where other operations may suffer or not stay up to par.
An example would be the tornado. Naturally, a big disaster, a real focus, but took the eye off the academic rigor. Took the eye off the real system itself. And eventually, I think there were silos that were built because of that, and we can all identify what those are. And that's our takeaway, is not to do that. Be careful. We got to stay core to what our calling is to do. And if we stay the course, then we're going to be okay, and everything else will be solved. So I think that's a lesson that was learned.
That's important. And then the last one the council worked up was that we must make every effort to be transparent in our work as we select processes and commit resources of various types, not just dollars, but labor, everything. The community must know our work. We listen to the community, and the community know how we respond to the community. Our community has proven itself resilient and willing to problem solve. That's been well chronicled. Financial review summary: with the completion of this winter's the Columbia Safe Room, our final rebuild project, we will have fulfilled the April 12, 2012 bond campaign of our patrons' investment. We also expect a spend down to tornado relief donations completed this school year, and Joplin Schools remains financially stable with increasing operating reserves. This ensures a solid foundation for upcoming planning. I think Deb asked about that earlier, about the nexus between this and budget. Although this doesn't produce, and we will be studying the results of where we're at the time we budget, beginning later this fall, but this certainly provides a solid foundation whereby we don't see any drag on the budget, which is a big thing to not have from tornado recovery operations. We don't see that dragging down our operating budget. So that's a great point. We have challenges, but that's a great point to start from. Just to say a very important thank you to the generous contributions from grantors, all the funding agencies, donors, thousands of volunteer hours, and a supportive community. Other questions the board may have?
Where are we at with the mall space? Do you know?
We've turned it back over to the owners and made our last
So we're
lease
done
payment.
with that?
We're done.
Good deal.
I'm just, I need to say this, I'm very impressed with how Joplin basically responded to the disaster. Really, really done well. And really the takeaway is, yeah, maybe done too well. In fact, that became an end in itself. And so we're learning from that, okay? And that's really why we're picking up these pieces. So I think this is really a critical piece of information. And so I think the bottom line is, there's a lot of questions out there as far as donations, as far as, how the system responded and those types of things. And we're trying to be transparent with the board as well as everybody else. So I know there were questions around donations, and we need to maybe even clarify some of that and realize we need to do that and bring that back to the table as well. But we're going to need to have ongoing conversations. Now, between now and December, we're also going to get into other financial data that you're going to need to see. And I think you were starting to have those questions come up, and we're going to get that data to you. In other words, how do we compare with other districts as far as salary? How do we compare with other districts as far as total cost of teacher? How do we compare with other districts as far as cost per student? How do we compare with other districts as far as property taxes and assessed value and all that? That data is really critical. And I've always found that the community is always shocked as to how we compare, because there was a lot of assumptions that are made, there's a lot of conversation. And so it's our job to give to you what that looks like. And we're going to do that for you. And Paul's working on that already, and Tina's working on it. Kelly's really, I'm calling her the data queen, because everything is flowing through her as far as putting together good language. So, okay?
And for the public, I believe this is posted to our website, so the public can view this now.
It is, it's posted right now.
Okay.
Good job, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
job.
I'm gonna leave, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Good luck with that.
All right.
Not at all.
Next order of business, policy BBB. Dr. Reader?
Yeah, the policy committee, Linda and Jennifer on the policy committee, and basically two policies that we need to have the board have a conversation around. One is, let's go with, well, they're both BBB, but there's two versions of it. I'm sorry, there's two versions of it. The first version is the one that we currently have, and which one is that here?
Order of files.
This one? This one here, the current policy, it says on the top, obviously. And then the second one is the adjusted language. So Linda, you want to kind of walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, and how this came about, Deb, help me out, because I remember you and I had this conversation. We looked at the process right now is in order of however you camp out at the admin building. And then also people that want to file that maybe are unable to camp, or somebody that is in the service. There's some areas in here that kind of didn't really seem, I don't know if it's fair or whatever. So I posed a question that said, is there another option? And so then this came up that looked at random. This is really not exactly what I had in mind when I talked about random. I was thinking at the end of the filing period, randomizing all names. What came together here in this policy is randomizing the names of the people that wanted to file only on that first day, where the big rush is. So as a board, we can decide if we want to keep current policy, which is in whatever order that you camp and come in that morning and sign up is the order in which you are on the ballot. Or do we want to fully randomize just that day, or fully randomize the entire filing period?
Yeah, that's good summary right there. One of three options for you. And
But
how
what
many-
is written, there is nothing written on fully randomized filing period.
Right.
But we can get that language and we can do that.
And I've
You just need the
experienced all of
intent right now to be able
We
to
need to
write
know
some
what the
language
board,
up in that.
what the direction of the
Yep.
board is.
And then we'll write it, yes.
Okay.
Tell me your
Did you
feeling.
check
Do you
other
remember?
districts? And I just know that the city and the county, they just randomize, but I don't know if they randomize on first day or if they just randomize total.
You mean other districts?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they're all over the place. In the last three districts I've been in Melville, they waited in line, and actually, put up camp. I guess that's what happens here.
Yes.
In Springfield, basically, you met a deadline, and the first person that came in drew. They weren't guaranteed the first ballot, okay, but they were the first one to draw out of the hat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. That's what happened. So they could get a 5. But either way,
So that was that way. And then in Colorado Springs, it was basically a deadline. And then, of course, there you, as in Springfield, you need to have signed petitions to run. In Springfield, you need 500 signatures.
Oh, wow.
And in Colorado Springs, it was 100, okay? And so the first one to turn in their 500 signatures and they were endorsed would be, in Colorado Springs, would be the first one on the ballot. So those, it's just all over the place.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's whatever you guys want to do.
I don't have any preference one way or the other than if you're gonna randomize, I wouldn't just randomize for those who didn't
Right.
file on.
Just don't
Either
hold
do it
down.
random or have them
You talking
line
full
up.
random, the full
Sure, I
filing
mean, do
period?
it. Fish or cut bait. If you
Yeah.
want random, make it random. If you wanna have
Versus the
people
first day of
line
filing.
up, then line up. But
No, I like the idea of, okay, let's get somebody that doesn't just happen to decide the night before, I'm gonna go, have 100 signatures, something minimal, but everybody can come in when the gates open, everybody gets their ballot to go get signatures and come back. Then you know it's somebody that's serious about their intent.
Are you proponent of adding a signature requirement we don't now have?
That's what you said.
Yeah.
I don't know that I put a lot of value in that, because who checks the signatures to see if they're truly
We do,
citizens?
we do.
We do?
Oh, yeah. We had a guy
Somebody
collect,
here will.
yeah, we had a guy who collected 1,000, didn't qualify. Because he stood outside the district and was getting everybody's names, you know, it just didn't work. And we were happy that happened, by the way. But anyway.
And so what would be the purpose in requiring the petition signatures?
Oh,
In Springfield was a case of making sure that they had support out there. So you just didn't have somebody off
Wouldn't
the
that
street.
reveal itself on election day?
What happens there is you get some guys, well, that happened in Springfield, you get some guys who, they were really subject.
I don't know, they elected somebody that wasn't gonna run.
I just gotta tell you, I'm innately negative to pre-selection efforts. I just am, and that's what that is.
How does it work on your level? If you wanted to declare your candidacy, how do they determine who was first listed on the ballot, if there were more than one candidate?
That's a good question. yeah.
Well, it actually changed. They went, it was originally the stand in line thing, and then while I was in office, it changed to a drawing on the first day.
First day of filing only?
First day of filing only.
Hmm.
And I don't know that one is preferential over the other, but I don't know. I just think if somebody's going to file, let them file.
Okay, that,
I just-
where do you want to go as far as
Yeah.
policy?
I think
As far as ballot position, I don't care whether it's randomized or whether it's order of filing.
I can see how you might get some kooks. You didn't use that word, but I will.
No, I didn't.
The innuendo was there?
But, you know, I think they will be revealed for what they are in the process.
That's true, and I think this is a small enough community to do that. Bigger communities.
Unless there's some hidden cost that I'm unaware of, adding another, you know, if you've got 7 legit candidates and a couple of kooks, I mean, what's the difference? No cost,
No.
and
You don't give them a platform.
Well, yeah, but let's say you got, in the one hand, you got a business person who's just an entrepreneur and he's got a
No, and I
one-man
have no
shop, okay,
predisposition.
and he doesn't have time to go out and do a petition thing. And on the other hand, you got the local shop foreman of the labor union. He doesn't have to do anything at all, but he can get, I mean, you know,
No, it's-
there is that, you build in a bias
Mhm.
with that kind of a process. I just think it's undemocratic, frankly.
Yeah, I've seen both, that's what I mean, I've seen it all, so.
yeah.
I'm not in favor of adding requirements like a petition. And I kind of like the idea of random, the whole thing at the end.
Full random?
Yep.
I think the way that the old policy was written, if it's followed, worked, but it was too subjective to how people interpreted it. Well, do we wait outside? Do we use our key and go on and wait in the building? I personally would be in favor of random. I mean, I know the reason people want to be first on the ballot is because research shows when people don't know the candidates, they just go down the ballot, 1, 2, 3. But unless we can strictly enforce the way that the policy is written, then I would say I'm okay with randomizing it.
Well, I think the problem with some of the statistics is that it depends upon what kind of an election it is. And school
Yeah.
board elections occurring in April versus a presidential election when you've got a huge turnout, I think that affects the data.
Oh, I do too.
And
It does.
good
so
point. That's a good
I'm not
point.
sure we can put that much credibility into
Yeah.
the data relative to what we're talking about.
In my mind, it's kind of like we used to have this policy that you could permit your children into any school if there were space available. And so parents would camp out at central office, I mean, the night before, and then it would be like, who's jockeying in line first? And I just think it's an antiquated
I think
policy,
it's
and I think we ought to
generally-
just go to randomizing it
So
myself.
there's enough people that say random is the preferred. How do we
When
do
you
the
say
random?
random, we're talking
Yeah.
full random, or are we talking filing date
I was
random?
talking full random of the entire slate at the end of the filing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay,
I agree with that.
I'm good with that too.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with
That's
it.
fine.
That
And I
seems
also
to
think
make
the
it
current
fair, I
system
think.
is demeaning to the candidates. And I also think that there are some potential barriers for people that may have disabilities, may have
I agree.
limited networks. I broke my leg once. If I
Mm-hmm.
had been trying to file
Mhm.
and had the current system, it would have been a burden.
It is a burden
Get a
sitting out
message.
there at 2 o'clock in the morning
Full
when you're
Plus you-
freezing.
Plus, you've got to write a whole new set of rules beyond that. Like,
Right.
can you have placeholders?
Yeah.
You know, can you
So-
bring a lawn chair? Can
You got the
I mean,
general
it's just-
gist of it.
So mine is, what I got from you guys is full random at the end of the filing period. We'll put together some language
Do
with,
we need a motion or vote? or
No,
just
we'll vote on
recommendation?
it when it comes to the
when we
meeting.
bring it,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
sounds good to me.
All right.
Good.
That's everything on our agenda. Thank you guys for coming, and
Yeah, thank you. Everybody
thank you,
have a good
audience.
night.
Appreciate you
I
coming.
think St. Louis was losing
Oh,
5-4.
Yeah, I know.
what inning?
Oh.
6th.
Oh, what is it now?
6-4 in the bottom of the 8th.
Who's leading?
Bottom of the 8th.
Who's leading?
Cubs.
Oh.
Yep.
Cubs.
All right, so I would be
Marty
happy to
McFly
accept a motion
predicted
to
it.
adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
And second, moved in second, please vote.
Look at the voice.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Awesome.
Never
Way to go,
count them out,
guys.
right?
Wow.
Good night. Thank
As
you.
soon as I go home.
Now you got to determine who's going to be